Nia and Sefi were the picture of success, living in a house that gleamed with the fruits of their hard work. Nia, a gifted artist, had transformed the walls of their home into a vibrant gallery of paintings that told stories of beauty and pain. Sefi, a prosperous farmer, had fields that stretched as far as the eye could see, yielding bountiful harvests that ensured their status as one of the wealthiest families in their small village. Yet, despite their material wealth, they were deeply impoverished in one area, an area that overshadowed every blessing they had no children. The empty rooms of their home echoed with a quiet, unspoken longing. Every time they walked through the village, the laughter of other children seemed to pierce their hearts, a reminder of the one thing they couldn't have. In their wealth and respect, they had everything the world could offer, but the joy of raising a child was a gift that remained painfully out of reach. They had visited healer after healer, each one promising that they could fix what was broken. They had traveled to distant lands, consulted spiritual leaders, and even sought advice from strangers, each one assuring them that their time would come. But months turned into years, and still no child. Nia felt the weight of their childlessness more than Sefi ever seemed to. Though he was strong and practical, his heart, too, carried a burden that he rarely spoke of. For Nia, the pain of not being able to bear a child grew with every passing day. Whispers in the village, cruel and subtle, gnawed at her spirit. The mothers in the village spoke in hushed tones, and some even gave her the pitiful gaze that spoke volumes. Her inability to conceive was not just a personal tragedy but a communal one. Her heart felt heavier with each look, each conversation that avoided the obvious. Nia had always been the strong one, the one who painted vivid images of hope and wonder, yet her spirit now felt shattered, crumbling under the weight of expectations that seemed to grow with her years. Sefi's solution. One evening, after a particularly difficult day of trying yet another fruitless remedy, Sefi sat across from Nia at their dinner table. The night had fallen, and their home was quiet, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and the soft rustling of leaves outside their window. He looked at his wife with deep affection, but also with a kind of weariness that mirrored her own. "We've tried everything, Nia," Sefi said, his voice low but resolute. "Perhaps it's time we consider another path. What if we adopt a child? A child who needs us as much as we need them." Nia stared at him, her gaze distant, as if the idea of adoption were a foreign concept, a solution that had not yet been allowed into her heart. For years, the thought of adopting had been a distant dream, one she had quietly rejected. But now, with the weight of their struggles heavy on her chest, the idea began to take root. Sefi's proposal was logical, practical, and kind. It would bring a child into their home, easing the pain they both carried. Yet Nia's heart clenched at the thought. "I know you're right," she whispered, her voice tinged with sorrow. "But if we adopt, it must be from my ancestral village. The place I grew up, the village of the Forbidden River." Sefi frowned, momentarily taken aback. "The Forbidden River? You mean the one surrounded by all those old myths and superstitions?" Nia nodded slowly, the weight of those words sinking into the silence between them. "Yes. The river that no one dares approach. But there are children there, children in need, children who have nowhere else to go. It's the only place I could consider. There is a connection there. I feel it in my bones." Sefi was quiet, his brow furrowed in contemplation. He had heard the stories, of course, everyone had. The Forbidden River, with its dark, twisting currents and the eerie legends surrounding it, was a place most villagers avoided. The rumors spoke of things unseen, of strange events that occurred near the water's edge, of those who ventured too close and were never seen again. But as Nia's words hung in the air, he could see the longing in her eyes, the desperation masked by her quiet strength. He knew that she needed this, that her soul would not rest until she saw the child she believed was destined for them. "I'll support you, Nia," he said finally, his voice soft but unwavering. "But we must be careful. The stories, they can't be ignored. We don't know what we'll find there. Foreshadowing. As Nia and Sephu made their plans, the night air seemed to grow heavier, as though the very earth beneath them was holding its breath. The forbidden river, so near yet so far, loomed in the distance, a place shrouded in darkness and mystery. Whispers of the river's curse floated in the wind, drifting into the corners of Nia's mind, but she pushed them away. She had made up her mind. The child they had been waiting for, the child who would heal their hearts, was out there, somewhere, beyond the myths and the fears. But the deeper Nia ventured into the thought of the river, the more unsettling her instincts became. Something told her that this path, the one leading to the forbidden river, would not be a simple solution. It would not be the peaceful resolution she hoped for. And as she gazed at the moonlit horizon, Nia had no idea that this journey would mark the beginning of a story far darker and more complicated than she could ever have imagined. The Forbidden River was a place that existed only in whispered conversations, a thread of darkness running through the heart of the village's collective memory. To most, it was a myth, a tale mothers told their children to keep them from wandering too far, a superstition passed down through generations. But to those who believed in the old ways, the river was sacred. The villagers spoke of the water spirits who lived within the river's swirling currents, guardians of the land and protectors of its secrets. These spirits, they said, were merciless to those who dared disturb the river's peace, especially those who ventured too close to its edge with ill intentions. And the most sacred of all the river's laws was the unwritten rule: never abandon a child near the river, for the spirits would claim it as their own. Yet, as many tales go, legends have a way of becoming twisted. Over time, the stories of children abandoned by the river took on an eerie glow. It was said that those who left their children near its banks did so out of fear, driven by some curse or omen. The most haunting of these tales was the one of Decca, a woman from a neighboring village. Decca had given birth to a child unlike any other. Her daughter, born under a rare celestial alignment, had eyes that glowed with an unnatural, unsettling green. In her culture, such a trait was seen as an omen, a sign of misfortune, or worse, a curse. Decca, terrified by the whispers of her village and convinced that her daughter was marked by dark forces, made a fateful decision. She journeyed to the Forbidden River, carrying the child in her arms, and left her by its waters, hoping the spirits would take her away and erase the curse that clung to her. The villagers spoke of Decca's anguish, of her heartbroken cries as she walked away, leaving her child behind. They said that no one ever saw the child again. Some claimed the spirits had taken her, others said the child had vanished into the mist that surrounded the river's edge, never to be found. The story of Decca and her cursed child became a cautionary tale, and the legend of the Forbidden River grew even more sinister in the minds of the villagers. Nia and Sephu's journey. Years passed, and the shadows of the Forbidden River loomed larger in the hearts of the people. But for Nia and Sephu, the journey to this mysterious place was not one of superstition, it was a journey of hope, a quest to find the child who would fill the emptiness in their lives. Nia had not returned to her childhood village in many years, but the pull of her ancestral home was strong. She and Sephu set out together, their hearts heavy with both anticipation and trepidation. The road to the Forbidden River was long, winding through dense forest and over rugged hills, the landscape growing wilder as they ventured deeper into the heart of the land. The further they traveled, the more Nia felt the weight of the past pressing upon her. Her memories of the village were not just filled with love, they were tinged with sorrow. The whispers of her own inability to conceive, the pitying looks from distant relatives, the painful reminder of the absence of a child, all came flooding back. But she held on to her faith, the belief that this journey would change everything. When they finally arrived at the village, the elders welcomed them with a mixture of warmth and weariness. They spoke of the river with reverence, warning Nia and Sephu of the dangers of seeking a child from such a place. But despite the warnings, Nia's resolve remained firm. She had heard the stories, but none of them mattered now. What mattered was the child they had come to find. The elders, though hesitant, led them toward the riverbank, where the water flowed with a strange, hypnotic rhythm. The air was thick with mist, the sunlight dimming as though the river itself commanded the sky to darken. There was a stillness in the air, a quiet that felt both eerie and sacred. As they walked along the river's edge, they came upon something that sent a chill down Nia's spine. The discovery. Nestled among the tangled roots of an ancient tree, half buried in the mud, lay an abandoned child. The baby was a girl, no more than a few months old, her tiny body swaddled in rags that had long since become soaked and stained by the river's edge. Her skin was dirty, her small face streaked with the grime of the earth, but her eyes, those eyes, were what caught Nia's attention. The child's eyes glowed a brilliant, unsettling shade of emerald green. Nia's breath caught in her throat as she knelt beside the baby, her heart racing. The legends had always spoken of children with strange, unnatural eyes, but never had Nia imagined that she would be the one to find one. Despite the dirt and the signs of neglect, the baby seemed unharmed, as though the river itself had protected her from the ravages of time. Nia gently scooped the child into her arms, feeling an overwhelming surge of love and protectiveness. She's ours," Nia whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. Sephew stood beside her, his face pale as he looked down at the child. The legends, the myths, the warnings, they all suddenly seemed so insignificant in the face of the reality before them. He had never believed in the spirit of the river, but he could not deny the strange, ethereal pull that the child seemed to have on both of them. The decision. Without hesitation, Nia cradled the child close to her chest, whispering softly to her as though she had always known her, as though she had always been part of their lives. The bond was immediate, undeniable. Nia knew, in her heart, that this was the child she had been waiting for. "I will name her Amina," Nia said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "It means faithful and pure. She will be the child we've longed for." Sephew nodded, his hand resting gently on Nia's shoulder as they both looked down at the baby in her arms. The decision was made. Despite the village's warnings, despite the superstitions and the old legends, they would take this child home. Amina was their daughter now, and nothing would take her from them. They turned away from the river, their hearts full, though a lingering sense of unease followed them. The river had given them a child, but at what cost? And what would the spirits, if they were watching, have to say about the couple who dared to take a child from the sacred waters of the forbidden river? As Nia and Sephew walked back toward the village, the wind seemed to whisper, as though the river itself was calling after them. The journey ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: their lives would never be the same again. When Nia and Sephew returned home with Amina, their grand house seemed to shift in its very essence. The empty rooms that once echoed with the silence of unfulfilled hopes now buzzed with an energy that was both new and unnerving. It was as if the house, too, recognized that something, or someone, had arrived to change everything. Amina, despite the journey she had endured, was a picture of tranquility. She was unlike any child Nia and Sephew had ever known. Her eyes, still glowing an unnatural green, seemed to see beyond the confines of the room, beyond the edges of their world. The couple doted on her, showering her with love, but from the start, there was an air of unease that lingered in the corners of the house. Unlike most infants, Amina hardly cried. Even in moments of hunger or discomfort, she maintained an eerie calmness, her piercing gaze never wavering. She would lock eyes with Nia or Sephew and the sense of connection was profound, as if she understood them in ways no one else could. Yet, it was a connection that left Nia feeling both comforted and unsettled. There was something deeply intense about Amina's presence, an unsettling awareness in her gaze that made Nia feel like she was under a spell. Unusual abilities. Amina's strange abilities began to reveal themselves in subtle ways. The house, once dull and uninspired, seemed to come alive in her presence. Plants that had been wilting and dry suddenly bloomed, their leaves vibrant with life. The air felt fresher, lighter, as if Amina carried an unseen force that infused the space around her. Animals, too, were drawn to her. The family's dogs, usually wary of strangers, would follow her every movement with eager devotion, lying at her feet and nuzzling her as if she were their own. Birds perched outside the windows, watching her with a strange intensity, their songs echoing in the stillness of the house. Nia had never seen anything like it. It was as though Amina had a unique power to soothe and animate everything around her. But these changes were not without their darker side. Neighbors began to take notice, some drawn to Amina's beauty and presence, while others murmured about her strange eyes, the way she could sit for hours without moving or making a sound, her gaze never straying from the same spot. They whispered about the legends of the Forbidden River, about the unnatural abilities that children born near its waters were said to possess. Nia, despite her growing affection for Amina, began to feel an unsettling discomfort as these whispers reached her ears. Community's response. While many in the village admired Amina's ethereal beauty, her striking green eyes and tranquil demeanor only seemed to make others uncomfortable. Some of the women, who once fawned over Nia and Sefiu, began to distance themselves, unsure of how to react to a child who seemed so different. They praised Amina's outward beauty, but the looks they exchanged with one another spoke of a quiet weariness, an unease that lingered just beneath the surface. The more Nia heard, the more she grew aware of the growing divide. Sefiu, ever the optimist, dismissed the concerns. "She's just a child, Nia," he would say, wrapping his arms around her in comfort. "Amina is ours. Nothing else matters." His words were meant to reassure her, but Nia could not shake the feeling that something deeper, something darker, was at play. In their home, too, Nia began to notice things that unsettled her. Objects moved when no one was around. Shadows seemed to linger just a little too long in the corners of the room. The once perfectly ordered house now felt as though it was being slowly overtaken by an unseen force, something not entirely of this world. Nia's growing fear. Despite her love for Amina, a nagging fear started to creep into Nia's heart. It was the way Amina would sometimes sit for hours in the same spot, her tiny fingers clasped in front of her as if in deep concentration. Nia would watch her, a sense of foreboding settling in her chest, as Amina would stare at nothing, her unblinking eyes wide and fixed. On occasion, Nia could swear that she saw Amina's lips move, but there were no sounds, no words. It was as though she were speaking to something invisible, something that existed just beyond Nia's understanding. The child would occasionally break into soft laughter, the sound strange and unsettling, as though she were privy to some secret joke that no one else could comprehend. The days turned into weeks, and with each passing day, Nia's unease grew. She could not shake the feeling that Amina was not entirely hers, that the child had come from a place far darker than she could ever imagine. At night, Nia would lie awake, listening to the soft hum of Amina's voice coming from the other room, even though she knew the child was alone in her crib. She tried to dismiss the thoughts, but they persisted, gnawing at the edges of her mind. Amina's first word. By the time Amina reached the age of 3, the couple had learned to live with the oddities, convincing themselves that Amina was simply a special child. But all of that changed one evening when Amina spoke for the first time. It happened during one of the evenings when Nia was preparing dinner. Amina had been quiet for the longest time, her eyes locked on the fire crackling in the hearth, her hands moving gently over the fabric of a doll she had never shown interest in before. Nia, turning away to stir a pot on the stove, heard it a low, melodious murmur that made her spine stiffen. "Weare effenintika." The words were foreign, alien, and they came from Amina's lips with a fluidity that startled Nia. The child had never spoken before, and yet now she was speaking in a language Nia had never heard. Nia's heart began to race. She turned to face Amina, who sat serenely in the corner, her gaze unwavering. The words had not been random, they were precise, rhythmic, as though Amina were reciting something ancient, something powerful. "Weare effenintika," Amina repeated softly, her voice rich with an authority that seemed to echo beyond her small frame. Nia's blood ran cold. She had no idea what the words meant, but she felt them in her bones, as if they were a curse, or perhaps an invocation. Amina's eyes, now glowing with an intensity that matched the words she spoke, locked onto Nia's. For a moment, everything in the room stilled. Time itself seemed to pause, the air heavy with an otherworldly energy. And in that silence, Nia knew Amina was not just a child. She was something far more ancient, something tied to the river, to the spirits that washed over it. And whatever power she had was now awakening, as if calling out to forces far beyond their comprehension. The child who had been given to them was not just a gift. She was a harbinger of something much darker. It began with the dreams. At first, Nia thought they were nothing more than restless nights, mere fragments of her mind piecing together the oddities she'd been experiencing with Amina. But as the dreams grew more vivid and persistent, Nia knew they were something more, a message, a warning. In these dreams, she found herself standing at the edge of the forbidden river, the same place where she had once found Amina. The river's surface was eerily still, but the air around it hummed with a strange energy. As she gazed into the water, a figure began to emerge from the depths, a woman with eyes like Amina's, glowing an unnatural green. The figure's voice echoed through the water, resonating in Nia's bones, calling to her. "She is not yours to keep, Nia," the river spirit warned, her voice both haunting and soothing, like the pull of the tides. "Amina is bound to the river, to us. She carries the weight of an ancient covenant. When the time comes, she will return to us. You cannot change that." Each night, Nia woke with the sense that something terrible was closing in, something she had been too blind to see. The river spirit's words, cryptic and chilling, filled her thoughts, and she could not escape the feeling that Amina, for all her beauty and charm, was tied to forces far beyond their control. Sefiu's growing unease. Sefiu, who had once believed they were blessed to have found Amina, began to sense the unraveling of their lives in more concrete ways. At first, it was subtle, the air around their home felt heavier, oppressive, as if the very atmosphere were being distorted. The weather had grown unpredictable, too, with heavy storms suddenly sweeping through the village on days when there was no sign of clouds. Crops, which had flourished under Sefiu's care, began to wilt inexplicably, despite all his efforts. Livestock, once calm and well-fed, became agitated, bleating and pawing at the ground as though they sensed something hidden beneath the surface. The villagers were no help. People began to avoid their home, their eyes flicking nervously when they passed by, as if they feared the very air around the couple had become cursed. The once respected family was now a source of hushed gossip and whispers. Sefiu could no longer ignore it. Despite his love for Amina, he could feel the tension building, something was wrong, and it wasn't just the crops or the animals. There was something in the very air, something that had shifted since Amina had entered their lives. Amina's power revealed. The breaking point came one afternoon when a neighbor, Duma, came to their door. Duma had been one of the first to congratulate them on adopting Amina, but now his face was twisted with suspicion. His eyes darted to Amina, who was playing quietly in the corner, her gaze fixed on the door. "You didn't steal that child, did you?" Duma spat, his voice laced with accusation. "Where did she come from?" "No child is born from the river without a curse. You've taken her from where she belongs." Nia tried to calm him, but the anger in Duma's voice was infectious. The words he spoke were like nails against the chalkboard, scraping against the fear that Nia had been carrying in her heart. She stood up, taking a step toward Duma, her breath quickening. "No," she said, her voice sharp. "We did not steal her. We gave her a home." But Duma wasn't convinced. His eyes narrowed, and he stepped forward, as though intending to drag the truth from them. That's when Amina's power was revealed for the first time. The air grew heavy, thick with an unseen force. Nia could feel it, the temperature dropping, the hairs on the back of her neck standing on end. Amina stood still, her green eyes locking with Duma's, her small body exuding an unnatural calm. Suddenly, without warning, an invisible force slammed into Duma's chest, sending him stumbling backward with a strength that no child could possibly wield. He collided with the doorframe, the impact leaving him breathless. He stood, shaking, his face pale with terror. Amina, Nia gasped, as the child simply stared at Duma, her expression unreadable. Duma staggered to his feet, eyes wide with fear. You've cursed us all, he shouted before turning and fleeing from the house, his footsteps echoing in the silence. For a long time, no one spoke. Nia stared at Amina, who seemed completely unfazed by the confrontation. She had used her power, something beyond their comprehension. The truth that Nia had been trying to deny now stood before her in the form of a small child. The curse deepens. The truth came to light slowly, but it was undeniable. Nia and Sefiu's journey had begun to unravel, and the threads of their past choices were pulling tighter with each passing day. The village elders, who had once seemed like harmless voices of tradition, now spoke to them with grave expressions. It was one evening, under the cover of darkness, when Nia and Sefiu sat before the elders. They had come seeking answers, desperate for understanding. The river spirits, one elder began, his voice thick with sorrow. They chose Amina, not you. She was born to be the guardian of the forbidden river. Her glowing eyes are a sign of their mark. She is meant to return when she is old enough. You must let her go, Nia. You must return her to the river. Sefiu's face darkened, his hands trembling as the reality of the situation sank in. She's just a child. How could we? He trailed off, his voice breaking. The love they had for Amina was still there, but it now felt like a deep betrayal. She is not just any child, the elder continued. She is bound to the spirits of the river, and they will call for her when the time is right. That is her fate. Nia's heart shattered as the weight of their choices hit her. She had brought Amina into their lives, defying the warnings and the ancient knowledge of the river. And now, that same river was calling for her, and there was nothing Nia or Sefiu could do to stop it. Amina was destined to become the guardian of the forbidden river, her power tied to it in ways neither of them had understood. As the elder's words echoed in her mind, Nia felt a deep, painful truth settle into her heart. The child they had come to love as their own was not theirs to keep. She was a force of nature, a being bound to an ancient curse, and Nia could do nothing but watch as the inevitable approach of Amina's return to the river loomed on the horizon. The unraveling had begun. And there was no turning back, the final decision. As Amina grew older, her powers became more undeniable. What had once been subtle, her calming influence over animals and plants, now expanded to more unsettling phenomena. The temperature around her would drop or rise unpredictably, the wind would pick up in strange gusts, and even the sky seemed to react to her presence. She was no longer just a child. The spirits that had chosen her for the river now demanded their price. Nia and Sefiu watched helplessly as their daughter became both a blessing and a curse. They could no longer pretend that everything was fine. The villagers had grown more distant, whispers following them wherever they went. People feared Amina. The same green eyes that once had seemed so full of innocence now glowed with an otherworldly power, and it was clear to everyone that something was coming, something they could not stop. For the first time in years, Nia felt the full weight of their choices. The child they had fought so hard to keep, the child they had loved as their own, was slipping away. And there was nothing they could do to stop it. The encounter with the river spirit. In the dead of night, when the moon was a sliver of light in the sky, Nia knew what she had to do. The dreams had become unbearable, the pull of the river spirit too strong to ignore. She had to go to the river, to the place where it all began, and seek the truth. She told Sefiu nothing of her plans. He had been avoiding the reality of the situation, unable to face the inevitable. But Nia knew she could not wait any longer. The journey to the river was long and quiet. The air felt thick with a sense of foreboding, and every step Nia took felt like a step closer to a point of no return. When she arrived at the river's edge, the water was unnaturally still, like a mirror reflecting the moon. There, rising from the depths of the water, the river spirit appeared before her. The figure of the spirit was as haunting as Nia remembered, her skin shimmering with the light of the river, her eyes as green as Amina's, though deeper, older, and filled with ancient wisdom. The spirit spoke, her voice both gentle and terrifying. "Nia, the time has come," the spirit said, her voice echoing through Nia's mind. "Amina's destiny is sealed. She is no longer of the human world. She was never meant to stay with you. You knew this, deep down." Nia's heart ached. "But she is my daughter. I cannot." "You must." The river calls to her. She has always been ours, and we have waited for her to fulfill her role as the guardian. You knew this would come. Nia trembled, the weight of her decision pressing down on her chest. Is there no other way? Can't she live among us, as a human, just a child? The river spirit's expression softened, but her eyes remained steady. She cannot. She was chosen to protect the river, to guard the secrets of the water and the land. If you choose to keep her, you will not only condemn her to suffer, but the balance of nature will be disturbed. The world will suffer the consequences of your selfishness. Nia felt the tears begin to fall, her heart breaking in a way she had never known. And if I let her go, what will happen to her? She will become one with the river, a force of nature. She will protect the waters, the lands, and the people who live here. She will never be truly gone, for the river and its spirits are eternal. But she will no longer be your child. Amina's destiny. Nia stood there, lost in the weight of the river spirit's words. How could she make this choice? How could she let go of the child she had loved so fiercely, the child who had brought light and joy to their home? But deep down, she knew what was right. She knew that Amina's destiny was not hers to change. Amina was a part of something far greater than herself, something that had been written long before Nia and Sefiu had ever laid eyes on her. Nia closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. When she opened them again, she knew what she had to do. The love she felt for Amina would never fade, but it would have to be enough to let her go. For the first time in her life, Nia understood what true love was, a love that could let go, even when it hurt. The sacrifice. The journey back home was quiet, Nia's heart heavy with the decision she had made. As soon as she reached their house, she found Sefiu waiting for her. His face was drawn, his eyes hollow with worry. He had known, deep down, that this day would come. I saw it in your eyes, he whispered, his voice breaking. You went to the river, didn't you? Nia nodded, the weight of the choice pulling at her. Sefiu, we have to let her go. The river, it's calling for her. It's time. Sefiu stood frozen, unable to speak for a moment. The silence between them was thick, filled with unsaid words and broken dreams. But in that silence, Nia saw the understanding in his eyes. He had always known, just as she had. It was the hardest thing they would ever do, but they could not keep Amina from her fate. That night, they sat together with Amina. The child, who had grown into a beautiful young girl, looked at them with her luminous green eyes, her expression peaceful, as if she already understood what was to come. I will always love you, Nia whispered, her voice thick with emotion. And I will always be with you, even when you cannot see me. Amina's face softened, and she smiled, her eyes glowing even brighter. I know, Mama, she said softly. I will always be with you, too. And one day, we will meet again. Amina's farewell. With tears streaming down her face, Nia hugged Amina one last time. Sefiu held her close, his tears falling freely. It was the hardest thing they had ever done, but in that moment, they knew it was the right thing. Amina stood, her small body radiating an unnatural calm. She walked toward the door, then paused, turning back to face her parents. She gave them one last, knowing smile, and then she left. They followed her to the river's edge, where the water seemed to welcome her, a gentle current rising to meet her. The moment Amina stepped into the river, the water parted around her, as if acknowledging the return of its guardian. As she disappeared beneath the surface, the river seemed to calm, the waters flowing more gently than they ever had before. The land around the village began to flourish, crops growing lush and strong, the animals returning to their peaceful ways. The river's peace. Though Nia and Sefi were heartbroken, they knew that Amina had fulfilled her purpose. She was no longer just their daughter, she had become something far greater, something eternal. The river was at peace, and with it, the land began to thrive once more. Nia and Sefi continued their lives, carrying the memory of their daughter with them. Every time they passed the river, they would pause, knowing that Amina's spirit was there, watching over them and the land she had sworn to protect. In their hearts, they knew that love, no matter how painful, was about letting go, and they had loved Amina enough to do just that. The river remained still, the secret of its depths now safe under the watchful eyes of its eternal guardian.